Greetings, Marsh here. Welcome to episode 21 of my Industrial Revolution 3 playthrough. In this episode, we are going to set up our oil processing. Enjoy. There's nothing too spectacular about it, so we can probably just kind of place it wherever. But let's build one of them first. So the input would be on the left. And let's put a second machine down here to see. Are the short pipes going to reach? Luckily they do. So this is a situation where having these short underground pipes is going to save us an enormous amount of pipes. So it would basically be this. But also we need to remember that this is going to have an output of the bitumen. So it has to go somewhere. If it was right here, we could have a long-handed inserter picking up right there and throwing it in. And if we put a power pole there, it would be covered. So we can put something right here and everything would reach. It would need some lights, but we can worry about that later. We should probably get the heavy roller to clear out all those for us, because otherwise it's going to be a lot of work. We actually kind of want to be careful where we put this, because if we put it too close to these cliffs or the ocean, there won't be any room to expand it. So we should probably start building it from the bottom first. And one feature of this vehicle is you can just run through trees and it will absorb them. It's an annoying way of clearing trees, but it does work. So we have a cliff right here, so we need to place this higher than that. We will soon be able to clear it, but nonetheless, we don't want it to be in the way. And how about right here, which would be lined up there, and that is enough out of the way of that cliff. It is nice using this just to get right into where we want to clear trees out, and it's going to be a lot. In fact, how about we just sort of clear all of this, because it's essentially going to be in the way. Okay, we need a total of 10 of these. And actually, now that we have 2 of them, we probably can put a light in there. So that's 6, 8, and 10. Hopefully all that's lined up. We won't need the pipes at the very bottom now. Keep moving this forward because we have a lot of trees to clear out. Well, that takes care of those machines. We are going to need to store all of the bitumen. The rate that we're going to create it is going to be relatively slow. So a yellow belt with 1 loader should be plenty. And actually, let's use some Nixie tubes for this. The bitumen stacks in units of 100, which means 3,000 will fit in here. And this is all slowly filling up as you would expect. But the way that it works is basically like this. So we would want to position this basically out of the way, so the numbers weren't blocked by anything. And the bitumen is kind of hidden on its own row here. And we would want to divide it by 300 to turn it into a percent and get it all set up. So now this should tell us the percent full that this chest is. So if it's starting to get close, then we might want to do something with it. But for now, it's fine. We need to fill up with water here. And remember that making the sulfur will generate some water, so we need to always have room for that water in the system, which means we probably want to have a storage tank, and we want an offshore pump, and a valve. Let's see if we can get all this lined up, because we would want it to be right there, and it does. Excellent. The performance of the pump will be ideal if it is as close to the tank as possible, so we will do a one-way valve here, but switch it to top up, which means it's only going to fill it up to 80%. It's going into the tank here, but now it's basically filled up. And when we hook that up, now the pipes will fill up, but they will not be completely full. Well, we still need to deliver the oil, but also we need a few tanks to store our output. So let's kind of space and offset them like this. And unfortunately, that inserter is right in the way. Well, I guess the last one then will have to swing above. One thing to consider is that whenever you're producing multiple resources, you need to pick the one that is going to be the limiting factor. Because if we take it all the way down to these 2 fuels, we'll just end up using the fuels and the thing will go forever. So we need to consider one thing or the other to be the limiting factor. So it's either we're going to fill up on petroleum and use up all the natural gas, or we're going to fill up on natural gas and use up all the petroleum. In this case, it probably makes sense for petroleum to be the limiting factor, because we need to have it on hand in order to make plastic, and we will also need to have it on hand in order to put it into petroleum canisters. So it actually has some uses, whereas currently the natural gas does not. and that can just be burned away. But for the purposes of setting these tanks up, it doesn't matter because this isn't the end point of the resource, so we would want these machines to run as much as they could and just fill up the tanks. But since we are here, and there seems to be space for it, we can totally put some Nixie tubes in here, and we'll get them set. It needs to be divided by 250, since these hold 25,000. Let's unhook this for now, because we need to deliver the oil. We need to hook this up as well. Gotta get the steam in there for fuel, although very soon we won't need it anymore, because we'll have petroleum instead. But for now, we'll keep it hooked up. And we want to have a pressurization pump in here, just because this crude oil is going a short distance, so pressurizing it should avoid any flow issues. So now everything should be good. So when we hook this up, everything should operate. And lots of fire, and the bitumen is being placed, and the numbers on the tanks are going up. And this is basically what you would expect, that this first step primarily produces heavy oil. So that's the tank that's going to fill up first, and that's fine. How much power is this all using? A little bit, but not a ton, especially looking at pollution. It's making a little bit, but still the main pollution generator are just the boilers. Now that we are done with the first step, we can get rid of it. And then the next one should be based on whatever the next limiting factor is on this build. And it would either be cracking the heavy oil down or turning it into lubricant. And since lubricant is something we would want, let's do that first. We'll need to have 10 plants. Starting right up here seems fine. We'll probably want to have a pipe bus though, of the different fluids that kind of come up and over and down. So just keep in mind that's probably how it's going to be. Because we actually have quite a bit coming in here, because we're going to have sour gas, we're going to have steam, we're going to have steam for that too, and also sour gas for a lot of these steps. So we'll have our 3 fluids right there. There we go, and you saw the pollution amount there, that if you remove a pipe and the fluid does not have anywhere to go, it will create an equivalent amount of pollution for getting rid of the fluid, and it depends on how much is there. So keep in mind when you're picking up stuff that could dirty the environment, and it's pretty self-explanatory in the things that would, like oil, that it will create a small spill, and that warning there just tells you how much pollution it made. So since it was a tiny little pipe, it didn't really matter. Let's see, let's do something like this, and we know that the short pipes are going to be fine because this machine is smaller than the oil plants are, and it has no solid resources that are going to be needed. So this is really all that's required except for some power poles. And we might as well just kind of plop them in the middle. And let's just try to line them up with the other machines. Give them some nice gaps, but they don't have to be too far away. So how about we do something like this. Put a light in there. And now we have a repeatable pattern. We need a total of 10, just like the other machines, which would go down to here. And it looks like we're just about filled up. Because of the tanks taking a long time to equalize, it'll probably be stuck on 99 for some time. These also need to have a storage tank somewhere. So let's put it on the end, and it will also need to have a sour gas storage tank as well. Although storing it where we are going to process it makes a lot more sense, and I suppose we could just process it here. I was hoping not to have too long a line of these machines, but that's kind of what it looks like it's going to be based on the position of all of this. So I suppose we can process the sour gas here then. And since it's going to be quite similar to these other tanks, and the pipes even line up, let's do that. Lubricant doesn't actually have to go anywhere, so that'll just be static, and I suppose we should put some lights in here too. The sour gas will need to go somewhere, but we can worry about that when it seems like it's getting filled up. So we have to get steam in here, and also the heavy oil, because we actually need to burn some fuel here in order to produce some steam. We could hook it up to the free steam from the factory, but ultimately the source of it would come from the steam derrick, which is all the way over here, and right now it's producing 54 a second, so it did restart. But even at its best, it would only provide half of the amount of steam we need. So ultimately, we kind of just need to produce our own steam for this and not worry about it taking anything from the rest of the factory. Also, another reason not to worry about it is before long we will actually have electric boilers. So we really won't need to worry about trying to save the steam from the factory. For now, it'll just be a small annoyance, and luckily, we are making coke not that far away, so it won't really be that big a deal. But we do need to figure out the total amount of steam we would need. The regular process doesn't require any at all. It's the lubricant and the plastic bars that do. So how about let's just do about 300 steam a second. And I say 300 because a boiler does 60, so that's an easy 5 of them that we need to build. And we're not going to need an enormous amount of it, so how about we just pull from this side only? Because it's easy. But for now, how about we just come along here because it is going to need water, and water will be right here. Let's face it the other direction to make it a little easier. And these won't need any actual steam engines, so there won't be much to it. Just in goes the coke, and out comes steam. And yeah, we could potentially hook it up to the charcoal here, but I'm guessing that when the factory is going at full blast, there won't really be enough charcoal for the factory, so it's kind of unnecessary to send a specific belt from up here all the way down here. I mean, we could, I suppose. Wouldn't be the end of the world. Let's see what it would look like. It would kind of come through here, and this is annoyingly not straight, so part of me really wants it to be. So that would be a slightly better use of our fuels. So our steam pipe would be lined up right there. So we hook it up. Every machine gets its steam, so now the only thing it's waiting on is the heavy oil, which will start this process up. And there it goes, with the lovely green smoke. I'm sure that won't cause any pollution at all. So that's going to fill these up equally. However, looking at these other resources, the next thing we are going to find ourselves limited on is going to be the light oil, because the only thing we're consuming right now is the heavy oil, so eventually the light oil will fill up. So if we are going to be overloaded on light oil next, then cracking it is the next step we need to do. It would be this, and it may very well be similar to that setup, and it basically is, when you look at it, that it has 2 different inputs of fluids, 3 different outputs of fluids, and then it also needs to handle a solid resource, but in this case it's going to be sending the resource in as opposed to out. But nonetheless, the concept is basically the same. So that means we can essentially grab the entire thing, or at least until we have the correct number of machines, which would be 7, like this. We'll place it in there. Let's give it some spaces. I think we'll have plenty of room here. We probably want to continue clearing all these trees out of the way, because clearly we're going to need to. So let's make it through here and just keep going. I think I picked up some clips there, not that it'll matter. Let's get this hooked up, and we can get the other pipes hooked up too, so we just know where they go. We have to set these. Now to cracking the light oil. We're doing it kind of in a weird order, but we're just going by whatever's the most full at the time. It doesn't really matter which order you place all the machines. They will work the same in the end. And we actually don't have something for the natural gas. We should probably include it on our pipe bus though. And we need a tank for that. So we'll just grab one more, give it some spaces. And that goes down. We will need to have some stone come in here from somewhere. Probably want to try to line it up on the side here a little bit, just so we leave this area open if we need it for something. And we can just sort of steal the stone from here. We're going to need to have 1.39 silica per second, and that's technically not enough from one crusher. So we would need to have 2. So we can do 1 into 2. Something like this. So it would be lined up somewhere around here. Looking good. We want our efficiencies in there, of course. So now we need the light oil and the water. The water is something else we would want to have on the pipe bus. So let's continue it. However, we don't want to use all of the light oil. We just want to use the light oil that is above 80%. So we'll use a one-way valve here. It is kind of far away from the tank, so it's possible when we're producing a large amount of resources that this one valve may not be enough. But we'll try for now and use an overflow. So that should be everything to process that light oil. And it sure seems to be. It's pulling it down just enough for everything else to run. And now it's full on sour gas. So that's one more thing off our list, but now we need to handle the sour gas and make sulfur. So to process the sour gas, we're going to need 24 machines, and they need to be spaced like this because there are two outputs on this side. They can't be mashed together. So it will be built quite like this. It'll be a little bigger, but the build will be similar. Change the recipe over to sulfur. It does make the setup a little simpler because we don't need to have this double set of inputs here. So one more set of machines will then give us our 12. We need to have our sulfur as an output, which can come right up the middle. And there really isn't much room to put these inserters in here. So now we'll select all the machines, rotate them, get the inserters to line up, and if we put them in this exact spot, the pipes will line up too. We can save a little bit of pipes by moving it around, but now that I think about it, won't really save us that many pipes because we couldn't put an underground right here, so we'd only save the water pipe. And we need to connect all of these. Fortunately, the power poles just don't reach. So this is probably the cleanest way to cover everything. Kind of want to use pipe visualizer here to make sure everything's hooked up correctly. Let's do color by system so everything's color coded and it's a little easier to follow. Well, like right here, for example, it's not hooked up, so it's probably not hooked up here either. So we'll do it again. And those are different systems. They're not the same color. So it all looks hooked up now. And now we have some carbon dioxide, which we will need to put into a tank. We're probably going to get overloaded on it and just need to vent it. Let's line it up with this one here. But nonetheless, for now, let's attempt to save it. So as far as sour gas goes, we essentially want to use all of it because it's just a byproduct. And then ultimately, all this sulfur needs to get stored somewhere. It's lined up with the steam pipe, so let's try to do that again for consistency. Right there. And we also want to try to record the amount. We can put it right there, but move that wire one space over so we can see all of the indicators. And this will just fill up to maximum. Sulfur also stacks in units of 100, so this should otherwise work. And I think we're good. We're just waiting on the sour gas. So we'll hook that up, and making lots of delicious pollution here. It all seems to be going. And for throughput, even though technically it doesn't need to have a red belt, since we're pretty close to the speed of a red belt, let's just plop one in there. And now that will rapidly consume all of the sour gas, which is now allowing us to use up all of the light oil. And it appears like the next thing we are overloaded on is now the heavy oil. So the next thing we need to do is crack that down. The process is essentially the same as the light oil, it's just the build is a little smaller, but we can copy most of this. So we come in here, give it some spaces, and build everything out. Looks like the numbers are wrong here, because this thing is getting filled up rapidly. It should actually be divided by 30 instead of 300, which means this number is wrong too. That looks better. So it is going to be full very quickly. The logic is the same, where we have an overflow valve here. It's just, it'll operate on heavy oil now. And we need another group of machines supplying the silica. We might as well just use what we've got here because it works. Of course I misalign it by 1. So now the silica will find its way in, and then the only thing we'll be waiting on is the heavy oil. Of course, we are overloaded on sulfur now, but we are not overloaded on sour gas, which means all of these processes will continue. So in it goes, and of course everything starts up the best it can. And now we're going to find ourselves overloaded on petroleum. So then that is the next thing we need to do. And one of the two ways of getting rid of petroleum is plastic. And since plastic is the non-dump way of doing it, let's do plastic first. It's going to be 14 machines with 2 inputs and no pipes as an output. So we can probably copy this setup here, put a couple spaces in there, and plop it down. All right, we're going to have an output of plastic. It's actually going to be a red belt's worth, technically. And wow, that does fit. So each machine gets its inserter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's where we'll do the near side switching, and that will give us our output. We might as well use this system here to store them. Although technically, since this is not a byproduct, we probably don't need to actually store a bunch of them, because they will just be used as required. And in fact, right now they will go nowhere because they're not actually needed. So we can just sort of leave them there. So the steam hooks up and the petroleum hooks up. It's going to be kind of in the way, but for now let's just assume that it won't be. And that's not polluting at all. Purple smoke. But there it goes, and all of these will completely fill up, using up all of that petroleum. So walking back to the beginning of this process, we now have dumps for all 3 of the oil liquids. So it should be balanced out and basically be running at full blast. And it more or less seems to be. And we'll have to let that go for a while. Now the next thing that we're overloaded on is the sulfur. And out of all of the things we could use it on, we probably want to put it into explosives, which is just sulfur, coke, and water. And then we can make cliff explosives out of that. And also, we'll be able to use those explosives to make the analysis pack. So how many explosives do we want to make? Well, we probably want to base it off of the full output of this. And we know it's 14.59, so we'll do another line here of explosives. And the input, well, it's not going to let us set it. Let's just go with 5 per second because that takes care of everything. And that requires another 16 plants. And that's actually a good number because it's going to use up basically our entire factory's output of coke, as well as sulfur, so it really couldn't be made any faster than this. And it'll actually look pretty similar to this. We can just use 2 belts. It'll, however, be 16 plants instead of 14. And yeah, it looks like we can just kind of make them extend downwards a little bit more. So move it over a little bit. Well, there's a cliff in the way. Well, not for too much longer. That said, though, I would rather build it in its entirety now. And we do have a coal patch right here, so we kind of don't want to cover it. Well, the water is easy. We will need an input on the other side, and it's actually going to be red. And how much per machine? About 2. So will a long-handed inserter do that? Seems like it would be fine. So we need to get sulfur and coke in here. Well, sulfur can be this top belt. And the coke is up here. We are going to need the full output of this, so we'll just pull it down here, and it looks really weird to pull it this close. But it's fine. And sure, we'll just use this space up here, even though it's relatively temporary. I'm not sure if we're going to need coke for something else. Let's line it up as if we do. So that'll be hooked up. And it'll go forward. And here it is. So we'll make even more pollution, but also explosives. So this is the side right here that it needs to switch. Let's move this inserter up a little bit, and this one down a little bit. So we can switch to the near side, and then we'll be making lots of explosives. So that takes care of the sour gas overload. And now we are overloaded on the petroleum again. And this would be a good time to convert everything in the factory that runs on steam power to petroleum. And it's kind of annoying, but basically we need to do this one hookup at a time. But if we follow this steam pipe, it needs to be steam here because that is controlling those inserters. And it also needs to be steam here because that is where it is getting consumed, and we're a little bit out of range, but it would also go here to fill up these steam canisters, which we will need for our robots. So basically, what it means is we can stop the steam here, and in fact, let's use a pump just to save the steam that we made, because we can completely pump it out, and then pick up this pipe altogether, because we don't need it. And now we need to pick up all of the fuel out of the trains, because converting this is going to be a little annoying. And there's a little bit of steam stuck in the system, but we'll just delete it. And let's unhook that for now, because now the pipe needs to go down. Luckily it's lined up with the other pipe, so it looks nice and clean. Basically, it hooks up to this, and no, it's in the way. That's not great. I think we just have to pick it up. So, there we go. Petroleum has somewhere to go now. Well, kind of. There we go. And we'll give this priority, so it doesn't need to have any kind of overflow valves or anything. It's just what's always hooked up. We'll hook it up. It has now filled up the barreling machines, but we're going to need to have a bunch of empty canisters to do this. So, let's build one more. This will just be a manual process, so there won't be any requests or anything on these, where we'll just put steam canisters in there that we don't want, and then the thing is going to be emptying it and putting it back into the system, which we can then grab. Although, since we are standing here, let's put a speed module in there to make it go faster. Of course, all of our vehicles have the steam canisters in there, but they will eventually be replaced. For now, we just need 50 empty ones. So to convert the trains, we will just put 50 of them in there. Except probably take away one, so there's exactly 50 in the train. So there we go, we are consuming petroleum. It's being put into the train, however, it's not going to get this acceleration boost because it still has that steam canister in there. So let's just run it to the next area. You see that it created the empty canister, and now when we hover over it, it has its speed boost, and it is much faster now. It doesn't consume too much petroleum to do this, but it is enough to kind of keep this process going, and oh, looks like we need more radar. So we'll do the same thing to the other two. Put exactly 49 canisters in here. So, looking good if we just send this along its way. It will then use up the steam canister, and then fill up with petroleum, and get the speed boost. There is one other thing that we need those canisters for, and that is for our inventory, because if we're driving any vehicles, we will want them to run on petroleum just so they're faster. Which means we do need to have some kind of area that we go to in order to pick up more of them. Something pretty simple. Oh yeah, not that it matters too much, but we can put efficiency modules in there. This one will request empty canisters, and we'll definitely want a step on me plate. So we'll make a big one. They all go in there. And we need to make a request for one stack of canisters. And there we go. Even though we're using up that petroleum, we are still maxed out. In fact, we're maxed out on all three things. However, it's just because they are balanced with each other. Ultimately, the thing that we would burn would be the petroleum. So these other two being maxed out is just a result of petroleum being maxed out. Although we are also kind of maxing out on natural gas as well. So in the event that we are maxed out on either of those, we are going to need to get rid of it. However, that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.